Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be sharing an article that was published on the New York Times website, an article that is very, very telling of a lot of the narratives that we see presented to the public. None of this comes as a big surprise to me at all, because there is a history established here in this country that many are talking about. I mean, it's just out there, but of course, we know that there are reasons why these things are happening, and they must happen. All is known before the foundation of the world. And I say this often, especially to those of you who are believers in the Bible. These things were prophesied to happen, and this is why we see them happening. So what are we talking about here? We are talking about an article on the New York Times that talks about how police are justifying killing drivers. They actually came up with a way to justify it, y'all. And the New York Times covers this in great detail. And so I'm going to let you hear this article, and it's going to actually share with you some specific incidents of where police have actually put themselves in a situation. They jumped in front of vehicles. They leaped inside vehicles. They've done a number of different things to justify a particular killing, and they justify it by saying the vehicle was used as a weapon. And so people have analyzed this, professionals have analyzed this and looked at many cases, and they were talking about how these police were actually creating the situation or creating the jeopardy or the danger for themselves, but using that as a defense to justify killing individuals who were in vehicles or driving. And in some cases, they were actually not in moving vehicles at all, but vehicles that were sitting still. But yet and still, that same defense has been presented over and over and over again. Anyway, take a listen at this article. It is very interesting, and I will be right back.
On a Sunday in May 2017, a patrol car sat outside the city's oldest public housing project, waiting for anyone acting suspiciously. The two police officers heard Cedric Mifflin before they saw him, blasting music from a silver Mercury Grand Marquis. Then they tried to pull him over. He wasn't wearing a seat belt. Mifflin, a 27-year-old black man, kept driving. What happened next is disputed, but how it ended is certain. Officer Michael Sievers, who is white, leapt out of the patrol car, drew his gun and fired 16 times at the moving car. He thought Mifflin intended to run him over, he said later. The officer's defense of killing Mifflin, who wielded neither a gun nor a knife, is one repeated over and over across the country. The vehicle was a weapon. In a New York Times investigation of car stops that left more than 400 similarly unarmed people dead over the past 5 years, those words were routinely used to explain why police officers had fired at drivers. In about 250 of the cases, the Times found that police officers had fired into vehicles that they later claimed posed such a threat. Relative to the population, black motorists were overrepresented among those killed. The country's largest cities, from New York to Los Angeles, have barred officers from shooting at moving vehicles. The U.S. Department of Justice has warned against the practice for decades, pressuring police departments to forbid it. The risk of injuring innocent people is considered too great. The idea of stopping a car with a bullet is viewed as wishful thinking. Bad idea. Bad to do, said Carmen Best, the former Seattle police chief. If you think the vehicle is coming toward you, get yourself out of the way. Moving vehicles can be deadly. 9 officers have been fatally run over, pinned or dragged by drivers in vehicles approached for minor or non-violent offenses in the past 5 years. But in many instances, local police officers, state troopers and sheriff's deputies put themselves at risk by jumping in front of moving cars, then aiming their guns at the drivers as if in a Hollywood movie, according to body camera footage. Or they reached into cars and became entangled with motorists, then opened fire. Often, the drivers were trying to get away from officers, edging around them, not toward them, the footage shows, and the officers weren't in the path of the vehicle when they fired. You see many where bullets are in the back of the car, in the side of the car, said Jeffrey Alpert, a criminologist at the University of South Carolina who has researched high-risk police activities for more than 30 years. In the high 90 percentile of cases I've seen, the person's just trying to get away. Some officers who fatally shot motorists didn't appear to be in any jeopardy at all, the Times review showed. In some cases the vehicle was stationary, even incapable of moving. Yet prosecutors found that the claim that officers feared for their lives or the lives of others was enough to justify all but the rarest of shootings. Seavers faced no charges in the Mifflin case. Phoenix City and state officials have declined to release police body and dashboard camera videos of the fatal encounter. Jeremy Bauer, a forensics expert in Seattle who has testified for police departments nationwide and for families of people killed, reviewed the state investigative report, witness testimony, photographs, and other materials and concluded that the officer had not been in peril. It would have been impossible, he said, for Mifflin to have been headed for Seavers when the shots were fired. Phoenix City is typical of many communities where fatal police encounters with motorists have occurred over the past 5 years. It's in the South. It has fewer than 50 patrol officers. And with fewer than 39,000 residents, it's relatively small. The police department has lower training and qualification requirements than those of big cities. They're not Navy SEALs, said Kenneth Davis, the district attorney in Russell County, home to Phoenix City. These guys are average guys. The chief, Ray Smith, joined the department 32 years ago and has led it for the past 12. Its use of force policy governing how officers are permitted to subdue people has not been revised to include reforms that many other departments have adopted. Smith didn't respond to multiple requests for an interview. Neither the police department nor the city's lawyer responded to detailed questions about the Times findings. Law enforcement killed 2 unarmed black men here in 2013, but there was no citywide protest, no Ferguson fallout, no George Floyd moment. Phoenix City's use of force policy prohibits firing from inside a moving vehicle, but it doesn't say anything about shooting at moving vehicles. That is unusual. Out of nearly 200 departments that had such shootings and provided their policies to the Times, just 13 did not address the issue. Critics of the practice argue that shooting at a driver is ineffective or even disastrous. It's like you've created an unguided missile, said Chuck Wexler, the executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum, a law enforcement policy nonprofit. To identify cases where police fired into vehicles, the Times reviewed data collected by the Washington Post and the research groups mapping police violence and fatal encounters. Reporters then filed hundreds of public records requests, analyzed more than 115 video and audio recordings, examined investigative records, and interviewed dozens of experts and motorists' families. In addition to the 250 otherwise unarmed drivers, scores of such shootings involved motorists who held weapons or were being pursued for violent crimes. No one disputes that cars can be deadly. Scores of officers have been killed working accident scenes or writing tickets. But no officer in any big city that has banned the practice has been fatally run over by a vehicle he or she stopped. A stop, a chase, and 16 bullets. Mifflin sported a tattoo of praying hands on his left forearm. His right was inked with the name of his daughter, Shay. Only 5'4" and 130 pounds, Mifflin acted streetwise, posing like a tough guy in photos. But that was a front. He never got into fights, and friends often mocked him for how he spent his Sunday mornings. He was the one who stayed in church with his grandma, said Dontrell Greer, Mifflin's stepbrother. Mifflin lived in Columbus with his grandparents, a social worker, and a retired small-town Georgia police chief who instructed him to always follow police orders. He worked stocking shelves at Walmart and Piggly Wiggly. He loved cars, but he allowed more than 8 years of traffic tickets to spiral into a crisis, including a suspended driver's license. On that fateful Sunday in May 2017, he drove from Columbus to Phoenix City to pick up a friend. The officer's decision to pull him over appeared to be a pretextual stop. When the police stop drivers, often people of color, for an infraction, and then look for a more serious offense, 2 policing experts said. Why did Mifflin drive off? Maybe because of the suspended license. Maybe because of a story his stepbrother liked to tell. Greer had been a passenger in a car pulled over after the driver initially didn't obey commands to stop. The Phoenix City officers had aimed their weapons at him and dragged him out of the vehicle. Whatever the reason, instead of complying, Mifflin sped across a busy road. The police chased him. At that point, he was just 4 minutes from the Georgia line. He only needed to make it to the corner near Ed's barbecue restaurant, take a couple of turns and cross a bridge. But an SUV blocked his path. Jaron Green, a manager for a financial company, was about to turn into the restaurant for lunch. So Mifflin whipped his car into Ed's parking lot, stalling out, Green recalled. Sirens blaring, the cruiser came to a stop. Severs jumped out of the passenger side of the patrol car. Gun drawn, he confronted Mifflin. Green, the closest witness, said the car never came near Severs. Instead, he said, it appeared to move around him. And Bauer, who created a video reconstruction for the Times, concluded that Severs was never in harm's way. The officer initially fired twice. Both shots entered the passenger side of the front window at a sharp angle, indicating that the car was moving past the officers, Bauer said. Both hit Mifflin. Either would have been fatal. The vehicle kept traveling forward. Severs turned his body and his gun to follow. 4 bullets entered the passenger's side of the car. As it passed, the patrol officer emptied his magazine. His life was not in danger if the vehicle was leaving, said Isaac Lawrence, Mifflin's grandfather. He wanted to ask the officer, so why did you shoot him? Mifflin's sedan drifted across a road and finally stopped. At first, the 2 officers thought Mifflin had fled on foot. Instead, he was slumped over, dying from 7 bullet wounds. Creating their own jeopardy. In November 2020, Deputy Japhet Santiago Miranda of the Brevard County Sheriff's Office searched for a stolen car in Cocoa, Florida. He spotted a similar vehicle, which pulled into a driveway, then backed out. The deputy left his cruiser and stepped in front of the car, then fired 10 times as it moved slowly forward, the dashcam video shows. The driver, A.J. Crooms, 16, and a passenger, Sincere Pierce, 18, who had been planning to hang out with a friend, were dead. Officials later said that the vehicle was not the stolen car. In dozens of fatal cases over the past 5 years, officers reacted similarly, jumping in front of vehicles or failing to move out of the way. Such decisions are dangerous for both motorists and officers. Over the past 5 years, 3 officers who leaned inside vehicles during stops were killed when the drivers took off. 6 others were run over by vehicles they were facing down. Many big cities that ban shooting into moving vehicles also say officers should not step in front of cars. But of the departments that responded to the Times, more than 2/3, mostly outside big cities, had no such policy. Shootings sometimes had unintended consequences. In the cases reviewed by the Times, law enforcement officers did not just hit drivers, they killed 8 passengers and injured at least 17 more. A pair of settlements. The day after Cedric Mifflin was killed, Phoenix City's police chief said the encounter was traumatic not only for the man's family but for the entire police department. He described the death not as a killing but as a situation. We're going to try to find out everything that we can about how to avoid it in the future, Smith pledged at a news conference. But as of August, Phoenix City had not changed its use of force policy to even mention shooting at moving vehicles. Severs was still a patrol officer. State investigators waited 2 days to question Severs and did not record their interview with him, records show. Michael Giannacco, a former federal prosecutor who works with police departments to improve accountability, described the state's inquiry as inconsistent with basic investigative protocols. Davis, the county's district attorney, brought the case before a grand jury. The grand jury opted not to charge Severs. After the decision, Davis suggested to Mifflin's mother, Pokia Sanders, that she get a lawyer. She hunted for someone willing to sue Phoenix City, she said, but most lawyers told her that Alabama juries side with the police. 2 months after the lawyer she eventually found filed a wrongful death suit, the city offered Sanders $100,000 to settle. Her lawyer advised her to take it, even though neither of them had seen the video footage. So she agreed. The city then offered to show her the videos, but she decided that she couldn't watch her son die. Now, Sanders said, she wants them to be made public. I just need the truth, she said. Severs also sued the city a workers' compensation claim over an accident occurring on the job the day of Mifflin's death. The officer said he suffered hearing loss that day, in all likelihood because of gunfire. The city settled for $5,500. No police or city official reached out to Mifflin's family after he was killed, his mother said. She was the one to identify her son's bullet-ridden body. I carried him for 9 months. I'm the first person he ever talked to, the first person he ever smelled, she said.
Okay, so despite everything that was stated in this article, there are still going to be those who refuse to believe that this system that is in place, the things that are happening within this system, the things that are being justified within this system, you're still going to have those who believe that there is nothing wrong with the system. Even though all of these examples were shown, how you will have officers who will put themselves in harm's way, meaning there was no attempt at their life at all, but they jump in front of the vehicle, take aim, and shoot the inhabitants of the vehicle, and then say, oh, they were using the vehicle as a weapon. You see, they showed time after time many examples of how officers were not in danger at all, okay? But they jumped in or moved themselves in position to put themselves in danger just to get this killing and then the justification afterward. And so a whole lot can be said about this. The article itself revealed much of what we see happening. And of course, the majority of the victims are so-called black people. So-called black people. We've seen so many cases where it's overkill in many cases. I remember there was an incident where there was more than 120 bullets fired into this vehicle where there was a husband and a wife. And the system that is in place called it, with every bullet, all 120 bullets, they called it a justified killing. I remember the guy Milton up in Michigan. He had some mental problems. He was a special needs man, and he was even saying, "My name is Milton," and the officers were far away from him. Okay, now keep in mind he was an older man. He was an elderly man. These officers were well away from him. But the minute he took one movement or motion, and I believe he had a knife in his hands. Now all of them had guns, right? But they moved towards the shots that they fired at this man as he took a couple of movements, not even trying to go after anyone or hurt anyone. This was all caught on camera. This is what makes it so very important that people hear this story, because it was all caught on camera. So what the camera revealed is that he wasn't going after any officers. He had a mental problem. They were called to the scene to defuse this and to help this man. But instead, them being 20 or more feet away, out of harm's way, just because he made any type of movement or motions with his feet, all of them unloaded on him dozens of bullets. Now, explain to me why it takes that many officers with that many guns to unload that many bullets to take down a man who's not even trying to hurt them. This was something that they wanted to do. They said it sounded like a firing squad. But then there is the system that is already in place that says, oh, because of who he is and what he looks like, we are going to justify this. We're not going to say that this was overkill. We are going to be on the side of the system or the officers. And so we talk about these things not because we are wondering when we're going to get some type of justice. We talk about these things because we know, I'm going to speak for myself on this, because I know that all of this was prophesied and that right now things are on autopilot, meaning the system just can't help itself. Okay. For those of you who don't understand what I'm talking about, The Bible actually stated that they would slay us and find themselves not guilty. That they would slay you and find themselves not guilty, meaning it was going to be clear and obvious who is in the wrong. But because of this spiritual programming, not spiritual in a good sense, but because of this what do I call it? What do I want to call this? Predestinated. Because of this predestinated programming, that they were going to slay the children of Yasharel and find themselves not guilty. That's so-called black people, for those of you who don't know who the children of Yasharel are, right? They were going to slay you and find themselves not guilty. So this is why we see the same stories, different names, different city, state, different people played over and over. It seems like we are constantly hearing the same narrative: justified killing, unarmed victim, unarmed suspect, unarmed this, guilty. I thought he had a weapon, didn't have a weapon. I thought this, I thought that. She looked suspicious, he looked suspicious. Someone called, this happened, that happened. We're continuing to see and hear the same things over and over. And so it sounds like a broken record, but the same outcome almost every time. There are a few occasions where someone does do time, but even with those cases, there's always some type of drama surrounding it. And, you know, the Amber Geiger case is a good example of that, where they were trying hard to get her off. Even black people were trying to get sympathy and love for this woman who took an innocent young man's life. Even black people sympathized with her, even though she did not sympathize with him. She unloaded on him. And, you know, they didn't even want to arrest her right away, because it is just a part of the system to just carry out what was already spoken. That no person should be held accountable for taking the life of a so-called black person. This is how people feel. This is how the world feels. This is how they feel. So anyway, I wanted to share this article with you all. And of course, you can right away attach WETIKO to this, because in some of these cases, they were saying that there was no threat to the officer at all. But he was like, why are you threatening me? Right? Their actions made it seem as though they were the ones in harm's way when they were not. As in the case of the one young man they were talking about, they went after him for something very, very minor, which ended in him losing his life. And so their narrative that they speak to the public and to everyone and to their superiors is that, we were in danger. We feared for our lives, when really they were never in danger. There was no fear for their lives. But WETIKO says, look, that person was the savage and I was the one that was innocent. That's what WETIKO, that's how people with WETIKO process things. And as I've stated many times before, I don't believe that WETIKO is only exclusive to one race of people. I do believe that anyone could be guilty of this. But as we see time and time again, it is being played out in society in ways that is unimaginable. So I am done with this story. Want to know what your thoughts are in the comment section below, but remember to keep it tight and keep it right. But until next time. We hope you liked today's topic. Please leave your comments below. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, share it like this video, and with that, we're out. Be sure to ring the bell to be notified of new uploads on this channel, and also comment, share, like, and subscribe.